Thank you. Thank you. EPUB is happy to be the sponsor of our panel today of Insights into Strategy. We are a global panel-based research company with over 20 million panels worldwide. 6 million of those are here in the U.S. And as I was preparing to come to St. Louis, I wanted to see who else was likely to come to St. Louis in the next year. So I added two questions to our daily omnibus. One is, have you ever been to St. Louis? And the other is, are you considering a trip to St. Louis? And so those two questions, I can put that data into our Hope Files data source and pull out hundreds, if not thousands, of data points. And so I ran a couple of interesting statistics here on St. Louis travelers that are how they differ from the NAT rep. I wanted to share those. I also looked at them as baseball fans. That was the number one sport that St. Louis visitors follow. And obviously, no surprise, the St. Louis Cardinals fans they're more likely to be St. Louis Cardinal fans than NAT rep. But I also found it interesting that these other teams scored high on the St. Louis visitors, and they're 4 times more likely to own a horse than the NAT rep. So if you're looking to attract people to St. Louis, look for those horse owners. Just a small sample of how we can turn 2 questions into a visitor profile for you. I've got literally hundreds of points of data on St. Louis visitors I'm going to share with the Explore St. Louis team after the conference. If you'd like to know how 2 questions can help you understand your visitors, let me know. But now I'd like to introduce the moderator of this session, Denise Miller, Executive Vice President of Smart Insights.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. I'm very excited about this session, research from the C-suite. And many of you know that I started in the C-suite. I started as the head of a couple of CDVs in Indiana, and then I was the state tourism director in Indiana. So it was those experiences that got me interested in this, because at that point, there was hardly any research. And I saw the power of research and what it could do. And so I went into finding ways to get tourism destinations to do research. And it's so interesting now because I will not say how many years later this is, but a lot. But we've gone from where there's, the idea there was you need to do research to now there's a fire that goes out, data and research and so much. And how is a CEO need to use all that data? What does it need? How do we serve it up to you? How can it be helpful? So that's what we're going to talk about. We have 3 great leaders to give us insights and talk to us. And I'm going to start out and let them introduce themselves. So Craig, you want to start?
Yes, hi, everybody. I'm Craig Beers. I'm the president and CEO of Visit Dallas.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Monica Smith. I'm the president and CEO of Southeast Tourism Society.
I'm Stephen Faust. I'm the director of the Missouri Division of Tourism.
Okay, so first question, let's just start talking about how is research important to your organizations? Why is it important? What do you do with it? Kind of talk line. Right?
So, we're lucky enough to have a big enough budget that we can afford to buy some pretty robust data. And that is not the case of a lot of other DMOs. But in our case, I really hesitate to make big decisions without it being informed by research. So for the most part, I don't do it unless I have research that guides me. That's not in every case. I would be that a robot. But if I'm being honest, it's a big decision. How we're going to spend our money, how we're going to market, how we're going to steer the ship. It is informed first by data.
That's great. What I would say is I think the research definitely is more important. Out like great tweet, it's out in tourism. Majority of that time as a DMO sales leader, so the results were important, data was important, the profiles of our potential visitors and clients that we were attracting support. And so that is something that I take it into consideration in leading STS. One thing that I'm very proud about is that STS has had a partnership, etc., for over 12 years in terms of identifying, for example, annual regional tourism, STS Connection. And so we are looking at what are the new trends and technology and insights that DMOs of all sizes are reaching, which includes certain states and DC need in order to make decisions about how they're going to market their destinations, how they're going to advocate for tourism funding. It's very important to have research and data, whether it's small DMO or large one, to be able to guide the decisions and be able to justify those decisions to the stakeholders and they'll explain it to the staff how it relates to the playing the part for the organization.
Yeah, I would echo both those. Maybe just take it one degree farther and say, because our stakeholders are the taxpaying citizens of the state of Missouri, we're funded fully by taxpayer dollars. And so we have to be able to not only look at our legislating leaders who provide our budget and give them answers and tell them with good data why we made the choices, but we also have to be able to talk to our friends and neighbors and say, this is why we did what we did. This is why research is so important to us.
So, I'll start since you're there. One of the interesting points you guys talked about, this is a new question. I did tell you I was going to ask, but just to keep it exciting. Well, because it made it clear, you were talking about almost two different purposes for research. One is to make decisions. One is to communicate to stakeholders. So what's the mix and how is that different? And just some thoughts on that I think would be fascinating for this audience.
Well, you didn't tell us you were going to ask that. So let me just, I think, our legislative leaders and our tourism commission that we answer to need to know that we're not just making decisions because Stephen wants to, because Dean told me that's the right thing to do, right? We do a lot because Dean said it. But we got to be able to point to sound research when we're spending tens or hundreds or even millions of dollars trying to promote Missouri. And then I think when we're talking to consumers, they need to know, you might find this hard to believe, consumers don't always believe in our approaches to marketing. They don't always like our commercials. They don't always like the way the things we're talking about. We need to be able to talk to them and show them, again, good data. Here's why we did what we did. Again, it's not just the whim of a director or the whim of a legislative leader or whatever. There's good sound reasoning behind this, and we try to work with partners that have a long and strong track record of doing good research in the tourism space.
From our perspective, here's how we research to guide our decisions. It really comes down to the educational content that we are offering for the members. Whether or not we should be developing new programs for our membership. That has happened in the past. I added 2 new programs. This is based on feedback we have and what they needed to help them be successful in their jobs. Obviously, in a profit organization, data and information and insights are going to be critical to where we allocate our resources. We're a small but mighty team of citizens. We want to do so much more, but we're limited in time and talent and treasure in what we can do. So we utilize those insights to guide what we're going to focus on. And then it's really important that we understand what our districts need and the challenges that they are facing. And also identifying the partners like me in the audience that can provide those solutions. So we have to be gathering that kind of insight and data as well.
I think Denise said something pretty important. She said, we used to have years ago kind of a need for data, and now we have too much of it. And I think we've evolved as a DMO through the years by talking very differently to different stakeholders. And I remember we used to get in front of our city council or elected officials and saw all these numbers where 16 billion, trillion, gajillion dollars, this many, this. It would make their heads spin and they would question as to whether we were talking correctly or not. And so being authentic and being believable is a big part. We do believe in our data, but it's how we communicate that data. So we're very careful of how we parse that out to certain groups. If you're talking to a bunch of hoteliers, they do want to hear about RevPAR. If you're talking to the Lions Club in your community, they don't want to hear about RevPAR. So you've got to be really careful. Even if you didn't even have all this data, you have to hold a lot of it back because it needs to be consumed in very bite-sized pieces. And that is a skill I've had to learn because I used to get up in front and for our annual meetings and saw all these numbers and people were just looking at me, not even listening. So it's really, that is, I think, the art form. Now we have our hands on all this data and we know what it needs. We need to slice it off and give it a place or give it to the people that are consuming it in a way that they exactly can consume it. Nothing more, nothing less. Did I answer your question?
You do it. And I'm going to let you keep talking. Monica talked a little bit about how they're in season search. Can you give us some examples of how to use it or where you use it to make decisions?
Research is everything to me. And, I have Michael in the audience, as I know you know who Michael is. He's an incredible professional. We research everything, not just the data that Michael researches, but I don't offer somebody a job until I've gotten the research on what that job pays in other markets, what is a competitive amount. Because we are under a microscope in Dallas, we need to be able to justify our salaries, our everything. So that is based upon research. But I'll give you the best example was COVID. I know nobody wants to talk about COVID, but when COVID happened, if it wasn't for research, we would have really had no reason to be in the party. The hoteliers went from, this is March in Dallas, we had pretty good occupancies from something in the high 60s down to single digits overnight. And so there was panic inside and outside. And they looked to us every moment. Well, we started with tourism economics to get quarterly snapshots for Dallas. They were holding on their breath, looking to us to give them the answers because they were not listening. Their owners were not listening to the head office of Hilton or Marriott. They were listening to the CDB. What is the CDB telling me? Because our data was informed by specific sources. So we became your guiding light. And I remember talking to, I'm not going to name the city, but my counterpart in another big city said that the hoteliers during COVID said, you should get rid of your data person. And I said, why? I said, that's the only reason why we're here today. We're not selling anything. So data became, and the market research that was informed by a lot of input, really, we steered our entire hospitality industry out of the darkness. And fortunately, we recovered like you all did much quicker. So data became our strength.
Stephen, I think Monica talked about how they're in this again.
So again, virtually every decision we make in the marketing realm is based in research from particularly the cities we market in, the markets that we get. A really concrete example I think I can give, this current actually fiscal year we're still in for a couple more weeks, we were fortunate enough to get some federal funding through the ARPA grants. And we decided to use that for tourism marketing. And so one of the things that we did was our research team was smart and looked at a market potential model that had been put together and identified some different areas where we might have success if we put some additional dollars or maybe put dollars in for the very first time. And so we looked at a couple of other data sources beyond that market potential model and saw that there might maybe an opportunity for Missouri and maybe even more particular Kansas City and St. Louis to get some more inbound travel from Denver. Denver is already top 5 or top 10 fly-in market for both St. Louis and Kansas City. And actually, I think it's also a top fly-in market for Springfield, Missouri, which if you're not familiar with this thing is in our southwest corner. And so it wasn't so much of a gamble, if you will, because it was free federal dollars, right? So we took those federal funds and put them solely into the Denver market. Again, the Division of Tourism in its 60-plus year history has never advertised there. And so we just started that in April, May. So we're only a couple of months in. We won't really see any tangible evidence of that, in terms of getting people to Missouri or seeing how people are moving to Missouri for a while. But our website team took a quick dive the other day for me, and visitation to our website from Colorado in general was up like 800%, and I'm not talking, we went from one visitor to 8 visitors. It's low tens thousands to upper, mid thousands. And then from Denver specifically, website traffic was up over 300%. So again, we don't know how or when that might translate to people actually coming to Missouri, but at least we're starting to generate some of that interest we hope in those folks in the Denver market are putting Missouri perhaps in their consideration set.
And I'm going to take a minute to say, I've been told if you guys want to ask questions, you have to ask them in the app. So if you want to send the questions, I have a few more, but I will be able to ask questions in the app. A topic that discussion brings up is how much detail do you want? I mean, you had a presentation just right before this that basically said executives want, just tell me the outcome. There was a lot of, looks like you looked a little deeper in the data. I said this, Stephen, I said, you sent me some really detailed questions. Our prayers. But so how much do you want? How much detail, how into the weeds do you want to get as the CEO?
So that's a great question. That previous presentation did raise a couple of questions, I think. And at the end of the day, I really do think, this is kind of some side. I like the pretty picture and the quick graph, right? And that's what I'm going to show to my stakeholders, to my commission, to the legislators, and perhaps to some of our, as you know, the smaller DMOs who maybe don't have the access or the funds to do their own research, and they just kind of need a top line visual. But for me, I know that I'm going to be in a hearing, right? Public hearing in front of the legislature. And there's going to be one of those that's going to ask me a question about that data. And I need to know the background details behind it. So the pretty picture and the quick bullets are great on the slide. I have to know, something about the methodology. I have to know, the sources. I have to know that deeper dive into it, because there will be somebody who's going to explain it or who's going to ask about it. And if you can't explain it when you're standing in the middle of a hearing room in the Capitol, you're going to be a little bit tricky.
I've considered myself for many years a nerdy salesperson. I was thinking, so I want all the data. I'm like, Steven, that's great that you give me the charts, but I want the detailed explanation of the insights that I can read and be able to make my own notes about and ask questions about. So, in detail, it's important.
So it all depends on what the data is. I'm a sales guy and myself. I came from a sales background. So my senior vice president of sales is saying, this is where our customers are coming from. I'm not going to ask for the background on that. I think I know how he got that information. But I'll give you another example. We're going to be building a brand new convention center that will come out of the ground in 2028. And we're going to have part of a convention center for the next 4 years. And we're going to be expected to sell a construction zone with half of a convention center. And it's what could possibly go wrong. So as we start to look at how we're going to supplement that business for other business, we're going into Smart Insights, and we're going into other data channels. And we also have some additional money to spend to market for leisure during that time. And then I then want to go with it. I want to know why we arrived at what we did it. Or ironically, we're looking at Denver too. So if you're from Denver, you're going to get a lot of advertising for different state. But we're looking at, as I was looking at any data or data that's controversial. So we're also a FIFA World Cup city, and I wanted to know, we just ran a data set for a 5-year forecast. What is 2026 going to look like? I want to know that Mike will push them back and ask the questions and that sort of thing, because just like Stephen said, I'm going to get asked that question from that geeky person, and I don't want to be the guy that says, I'll get back to you. I want to know what the answers are. So it depends on the data set and my own personal comfort level, but I want to know how we arrive at the numbers we arrive.
Okay, I'm going to ask her questions from the audience because I think it fits with what we're talking about. The question is, how often do you find vendor products overpromise and underdeliver? I think they're asking for a 1 to 10, 10 being never, 1 being, I guess, always. So, Craig, how often do you think you find?
I'm going to be honest here. I'm not the one that typically, I'm not the one that test drives the products, but I'm kind of a person that I've got a group in my mind of 5, 6 vendors that I really trust. So you're going to have to give me something that's really, really showing me different data or a different look at something before I'll trust it. I really like our data. I feel like our data is authentic and it's true as true as data can be. So I'm not the one that I'm going to go with what I know until somebody else that I trust tells me there's a better way to do that.
I would say most of the vendors that we work with deliver what they is by some means they haven't. We have developed a relationship so that we can get that correct. But in my role as the CEO of STS, I feel an even greater responsibility with the partners that we bring onto the association, because some of the, out of about 540 members we have, I would say 65% of them have, budgets less than $1 million. And so I'm very conscientious about what the service is when people are trying to sell it, to promote to SES members. And if the majority of our members could actually afford, because I know that's a significant, if it's a high cost, that's going to be a significant risk for them, maybe bring something from their airport. And so those are just things that we try to be conscientious about. And I think by and large, most of the vendors that we've had an opportunity to work with that are engaged in our membership do the right thing and want to help the destination.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think I'll probably get into a little trouble here with my team because the sales folks might come after us a little bit, but I do like a good shiny object. I'm not good at that. So I love those maps when they're glowing. Our cities are all lit up like, oh my God, I love it. So I have to be really careful, but I think one of the things that, but just to Craig's point, I know the answer was, but yeah, to Craig's point, the point that Craig made was, I'm not always the one who test drives those things, right? So I think it is important that you have a great research team that can talk you down off that shiny IT product. When I first started as the director of tourism, this is a little bit aside, but so my first day as the director of tourism was March 9th of 2020. With Paul's for me. Maybe you go March 9th. Okay. So later on that year, I was sitting down with a couple of my other colleagues from across the state, and one of them's actually here. He was the director of Visit Kansas City at that time. Probably the best piece of advice I got is you don't have to be the smartest guy in the room all the time. You've got to have a good team. And I think the team is really what can help you make sure you aren't distracted by the shiny objects and that your vendors are doing the right things for you and your stakeholders.
Which that is a great transition to the next question, which is, what advice do you have for people as they work as a research person working with the CTO? What do you want? How do you want them to deal with you? Not that Deanne's going to listen, but but you're soon going to have a new research person. So,
yeah. So I think to me, one of the things that a successful research person would think about is we get pulled in a lot of directions. And so we never know from one day to the next what questions are going to come down the pike, who they're going to come from, how we need to prioritize those. So I'm not a researcher by trade by any means, but if I had to offer maybe one bit of advice, it would be, either adaptability or flexibility and the ability to just do something real fast on the fly. It's especially like during our legislative session, which runs for the first 5 or 6 months of a year, we might get a request from the Capitol and they want it 30 minutes ago. And it might be something we've never even considered before. And so I think adaptability and flexibility are, to me, the biggest, benefits that somebody on the research team could have.
I would also say get into real courage to be able to tell the CEO what they really need to do. And to help throw some of the questions that certainly need to be probed before you act on the research. And so we, as our small team, we do not have a dedicated researcher. We do work with Shane and Gray and have been for many years research projects. Most of the research projects that I'm doing, this have appreciated by her to say, Veronica, hold on, there's something that's coming out of this research that we need to talk about. So that really helps me to know, well, what's the impact on our associates? So what's the impact when you do? What's the impact on our but help pointing those anomalies out or those big issues out that we didn't even think about that we needed to address is really been helpful to me and the team.
That's perfectly said. That courage to give bad news as that bad news needs to be given, or to already have asked the questions before I have to ask them. It's one thing you can order data and kind of just repackage it as your own and just serve it up. But I want somebody that has taken a number of different data points that has come up with the insights. What does that mean? What are the nuances? And I want them to be to really watch the data that they're getting, because data has a lot of fallacy in it, and I want them to push back before. But they have to be trustworthy. They have to be detail oriented. So that's a big part of my trust factor, is that can I trust the data that they've already vetted and that they're bringing to me. So it's not that hard. If you've got a good CEO that understands data, then I think you're a lot better off. And I know that that's not always the case, but or explain it to the person that doesn't in a way that they can understand.
So, Craig, this is a question specifically to you, but I think you can all address it. It says, I guess from the time you hired your first research person in Pittsburgh to now in Dallas, how have you seen the role of the researcher change?
Well, that's a great question. So I've been doing this a while, and we couldn't answer 90% of the questions that we can answer now back when I started. And we didn't have the budget in Pittsburgh. So we were making stuff up as we were going along, or we're doing it by instinct, and that works some of the time. We could never measure the impact of our marketing, and we just didn't have the money. We didn't have back then the data to be able to do it. Mostly the resources to be able to purchase it. So I am lucky now. I work for a wealthier DMO in Dallas and we have the resources to be able to buy the data. So it has changed dramatically, and I've got such more solid footing now and a lot more to lose, quite frankly, now than I did back then in terms of the ramifications of big decisions. So there's a lot riding on the decisions that are informed by data. So the stakes are a lot higher now.
I mean, we had talked about the characteristics or suggestions that we would have for younger research professionals. And just looking back on my years in the DMO, I would say I think it's very critical for the research team to spend time with the other teams, with the visitor center team, with the committed sales team, the services team, not just marketing, but the other teams to understand what issues they're facing, how they've worked, and what data you are receiving in the organization that can be helpful to the way. So I think that's a really good strategy for having a long and successful career in research.
I'll go back to so again, I don't have, nearly the experience they knew with working with research teams, but over just the last 3 years in this role, I think one of the things that's changed a lot is the ability to work with mobile data, and not just phones, but things from like smart TVs, the kind of data that can get fed up to other providers. I think that's something that has certainly changed and will probably continue to evolve more and more at a very high rate.
I forgot about one thing, that an important thing for a DMO is to have credibility amongst the stakeholders. So the stakeholders can be political, they can be our hotels, they can be the people that rely on us. And as the data gets better, people rely on you more. And if you think about it, in your own, for the DMOs out there, for a lot of people in the States, nobody has data that contradicts yours, that is credible. So they're really trusting everything we say, and we have to keep on point and not disappoint them. So now our relationship has very, very much deepened with our hotel community, especially because they trust everything we're telling them from the standpoint of our economic forecasts and what we glean from them. So that has become much more of a deeper relationship through the entire career that I've
Yeah, and don't you think, and I think this got mentioned before, but I think the pandemic really deepened the relationships because the states, the CDDs, there was so much data, and that was where lots of people, businesses were getting it, and I think it really helped.
If I could go to find a point out, there a lot of these hotel companies, Marriott International, Hilton, Hyatt, they were buying data from across the country from one source that didn't necessarily have tentacles into each community like we did. And a lot of time their data would contradict ours. And in the end, the owners of these hotels were believing us before they're believing the data that was coming from their product people, because we care a lot, or we put a lot more emphasis on it, a lot more care in terms of how we clean that data. And that really helped them as well, not put it into a corner of having to live up to budgets as they couldn't live up to. And I won't name the other company that has started getting alternative data, but their data was very, very, had a lot more, it was a lot cheerier than the data we were getting. And they were afraid that they're going to get back into these impossible situations to deliver occupancy average rate at a much higher rate than we knew what was possible.
So, Craig, do you have advice for people trying to come work for a CDB or a state as a researcher? You know, we do have some students. What's your career advice?
Don't be a robot. I mean, we need you to be able to look at data and to glean the data, but understand that, you know, for Visit Dallas, we are a community-facing organization that's very much in a fishbowl. So we are scrutinized. If you want to amuse yourself, just Google Visit Dallas. You'll see our history. And so we've been put into a fishbowl. We've had some issues in the past. So we have our credibility is everything we have. So come to the table with not only a heavy math background, a heavy research background, but also work on those soft skills, because Michael, I can tell you, he's speaking in front of almost as many crowds as I am. The demand for Visit Dallas is not for me to speak, and oftentimes it's for Michael to speak, because they want to hear the guy that has researched and let the insights into the data, and what he says means a lot more than me in many cases. So try to balance yourself and work on public speaking, as well as being able to and to communicate precisely what people want. As I said before, know your audience and speak to your audience.
I don't know that I could add anything to that. I think I think that was perfect. Really, just being a good communicator, I think, is a key skill for students coming up and thinking about working, if you will. Out all those lions, sometimes they'd want to with.
They do. And be ready to that.
I think that was great advice, because I do think that sometimes there's so much focus on the data and the numbers that they forget you got to be able to talk to somebody about those numbers or write something about it or present it. So.
Steve is right. I love a good graph. I love a good, I love something that tells the entire story. And sometimes we'll have these graphs and you're looking at it and they say that they don't overcomplicate things. Let's see things that have colors that are all look the same. It's the red color. That all looks red to me. That sort of thing. So you've got to be really careful as to how you show the data, and communication. Become, for those of you that work with marketing departments, become the communications person's best friend. They'll teach you how to communicate. That is a skill that you learn. Not many of us are born with it.
That kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier. One of the things I challenge marketing teams to do when y'all know about the conflict with sales. Not. And the way I eradicated that was have marketing people go on the road with the salesperson to a trade show. That created a different relationship between the two, better understanding, and that was why I was saying researchers that are passionate about tourism, it's important to not just focus on the marketing, but understand what the sales team is doing, understand what's going on in the visitor centers, and that helps you be more well-rounded and more critical as your career progresses.
Great. Okay, looking forward, you're in a room full of researchers who are trying to find new stuff, new data. What's missing? What are the gaps in the knowledge out there? What other information do you wish you had? What questions can we answer for you?
And that's a hard question to answer. We're so
Firepower and technology in this room. I remember one of the earliest jokes when I worked for a DMO and we're doing marketing, that one guy said to us and said, we know that half of all marketing works, we just don't know which half. Because like you had no idea if you're throwing stuff. And unfortunately, a couple of DMOs that I work with, they don't have any idea of the effectiveness of whatever they're doing. They just have used the same playbook time and time again. But I don't know of any. I think if I need to know something, there's somebody out there that can probably give me most of what I want. The biggest challenge is always, are we spending our money effectively in marketing? We could always measure our salespeople. We couldn't measure our marketing very effectively, and now we can.
Yeah, I agree. We do a marketing technical study every year, and so that really helps us do that kind of measurement. But thinking about the future was touched on this morning, how AI might affect things. I think that is, and to just technology changes in general. I think that is something we would all like to have a crystal ball to be able to peer into. What is AI going to do with marketing and how we target people and all those sorts of things down the road?
It's going to replace all of us.
That sounds reading.
And that was my insight as well. When is the technology get to, like, how are they going to be to do that similar than like?
So there are a couple other topics that came up during this conference that I'll just, like sustainability. Are you all doing anything? Is that something you're involved in? Resident settlement. So there's a couple topics like that. Tell me, where are you on that, and get any information you need? Are there issues you wish you could address?
Sustainability is such a big topic. We are working on ways to provide more education for our members. But as I do some research and reading, it's a lot. It's going to be expensive, and it's going to take a long time to implement it. And so that's just a big, very big topic for the industry. But I do believe that climate change exists. I think, Canada, the Southeast region, and all of the natural disasters that have happened over the last couple of years, we've got to work on this issue. And I've had a chance to, as part of my work, the Travel and Tourism Advisory Board, to make some recommendations as a part of committee to the Department of Commerce about disaster recovery, help make smaller communities close to me to get more funding quick for disaster recovery. So I do think that's an issue that we've got to figure out. This is happening more and more all across the country in terms of climate change and sustainability. And there was something else I was thinking. It's talking like they were ready.
So, I think one of the during the talk this morning, and somebody asked over here maybe about balancing sustainability initiatives with kind of the bottom line capitalistic side of our society, and I think that's really the interesting question: is when are our major players, our major companies, really gonna embrace these initiatives? I think we've all of us in the business world, the bottom line is the bottom line. And so even if it's good for the planet, it's going to affect the bottom line somehow, maybe we're not going to do it. And I think that changing that mindset a little bit, it's really an interesting balance in tourism, I think, because we want to get as many people here as much of the time as we can and spending all the money they can. But how do we do that responsibly? I don't, I've been to a lot of conferences, and sustainability has been a topic 15 times. Nobody yet has a really good answer. A really good answer that I heard on how to approach this. I think some of the studies that were presented this morning from the University of Australia, those were fascinating. As get the globe to embrace those kind of ideas, maybe you got a shot.
I think you both said some incredible things that, there's so much context to this because Dallas is a big place. We don't have a problem with over tourism. We just know. But if I was sitting here representing Palm Beaches or the coastline or other places, that would be first thing I'd be talking about because that is my product. My product needs to be saved. It needs to be harnessed. It needs to be sustainable. Now, I'm not suggesting that we don't talk about this in Dallas. We really truly do, but it's not as forefront of the mind, I have to admit, as it would be if I was someplace else. We don't have any mountains. We have man-made lakes. So there's definitely, we're talking to the brands and making sure that our hotels are implementing those because it is the future. It is happening and we all have to take part in it. So from a contextual standpoint, it's not something we talk about every day in Dallas.
She did these library with ones.
Yeah.
What are we to get? How do we encourage more young people to enter this industry and stay in that industry? How do we change the narrative? What parents' perceptions are of the work that we do? So we think we got to tackle that.
Yeah, seeing the tourism and hospitality industry, the career, not a job. That's the key. I know some of the folks in this room started their career in hospitality at a restaurant or at a hotel or wherever the case may be. And they've transitioned now into different roles. Maybe they're the CEO or, vice president or something. I think that the career trajectory is something that we as an industry really have to be able to get on and push to our younger people and get them interested in tourism.
You're right. So that's bigger way to look at sustainability and how do we feed future workforce. Absolutely.
It is fascinating because it's been a topic, again, I've been around a long time. I think even more than a year. And getting people to see hospitality as that, something other than low-wage entry-level jobs is really hard. But it's fascinating now, like, they're getting people back into the industry. So I do think that's something we need to try to address.
Well, we did it to ourselves. I mean, I started the hotel business, and every time the head office would send us an email at that time, letters or whatever, and said, we need you to chop 10% of your workforce. That's what we did. So we treated people like commodities. And in every single natural disaster, black swan event, COVID being chief amongst them, hotels shed 90% of their staff, CDDs 50, 60, 70% of our staff. So if we treated them like commodities and we're questioning whether they're not going back to work for us, then I think we have to just look in the mirror.
It is interesting during the pandemic, there was some discussions because, again, certainly in some of the destinations, open, closed, it was back. There was at one point, there were some hotel people talking about how people came back and then they had to let them go again and now they don't want to come back. And it's like, okay, they got out of employment once, which took a while, and then you acquired them again. So, and schedules, I mean, it's really interesting. You're right. If we treat them as commodities and don't realize they have a life, they need to set up childcare. You can't give them a schedule the week or 2 days before they come. So that's a fascinating topic. But probably beyond what we're talking about right now. But what do you see as some of the biggest challenges coming for your industry, just so unprepared?
I think we touched on the workforce. I mean, that's going to be something we'll be talking about. I think sustainability is going to be a big thing. I think the buying habits change. You name it. We've got it. I've been through all these winds of change. I think we're going to come into some headwinds the next little while. I think we've been talking about this potential recession for so long. We are in a recession right now, but for the first time, I don't think, knock on wood, that we're going to be as an industry because of COVID. I think people are saying, I'm not going to buy the new washing machine. I'm going to go travel to Denver or to Missouri. So, but I think that this is going to be the first time that kind of it'll be a different buying habit. So I think we're going to have to, and also AI is another thing that I don't even have the slightest idea how to approach this at this point.
I do think let's piggyback off that a little bit, that we are in kind of a high topic in tourism right now, and the last 12 and 16 months, and some of that I guess is still revenge tourism, or some of it is some prioritization of tourism. And I think one thing that maybe would scare me potentially is what's if that does fall off. If people, they've done all their traveling, they check some things off their bucket list, and now they deprioritize travel, say in 12 and 16 months. Like, what does that look like for our industry and our bottom lines overall? That is, again, I don't really think we're in a recession right now to go out with people out spending and shopping and dining and going to attractions. But if we do see a little bit of a blip, what is the industry? How does the industry respond to that? I think it's a question.
I do have a question here. I think maybe this must be either from Michael or Deanne, because it says, how kind are you to your research manager when they don't act like it? I was going to say, I'm sure Michael and Deanne tell me you two are just always kind and understand. How do you, I guess more broadly, yes, how do you deal with it when you are looking for data and it's not out there? Is it just, I don't know. And then it's always hard to don't get what you want. It's fun of the way we get it.
I think that the thing is that, and Stevie touched on it, sometimes people, they'll call me, John Manager call me and say, can you get me this data? I have a meeting in an hour, and I don't want to, but I don't have the data. I'm calling Michael, and he's on the road or something like that. I really need this quickly. So there is this sort of fire that you have to put out. But I think that's a big part of our value proposition to our stakeholders, is how quickly can we turn it around in a customized way. But the data is there, and just have to find it. And I know, like, we stop sitting behind his computer waiting for me to call him to say I need this.
So, and as a good point, trust me, I understand that, because if Deanne and Michael don't have that data or can't get it, guess who they call? So I'm saying that I've got those calls. Steven needs to see you right now. Okay. We'll get that. Okay. We're almost at the end of time. If anybody has any last question they want to put through the app, or sure, can you?
So, good afternoon. I was thinking something after each other.
I'm sorry, you're gonna have to speak out. Like, take it.
Good afternoon. I wanted to talk about the future of our workforce, and I appreciate the comment about we did it to ourselves. But one of the things, I'm in higher ed, and one of the things I try to get industry to understand is they will come to recruit students, and the first thing they say is, "Well, you're gonna have to pay their dues. You're not gonna usually go to manage." And you're talking to kids, I call them kids. At this point, they make it college 3 or 4 years as an investment into their future. And this is not something someone from accounting would say, or someone with recruiting nurses, engineers. And something as simple as that to change the narrative. And it's almost said through the lens of like arrogance or something. And immediately you've lost the kids. And of course their parents, because they're thinking, I didn't send you here to go and say, and then like the thing happened in there. It's like it's sitting in the country with an intern making work. And I'm not sure if that helps anyone in this room, but I have almost banned that jargon because I'm not going to get anyone. And so I just kind of wanted to share that even if those of us that are in the industry, if we just speak more fondly and to speak up in positives and how it's been for us, I think that because these kids are excited about it. They chose this. And then someone comes in and the first thing they say is, well, you're not going to come in and, you have to pay your. I started as a dishwasher. We don't even wash dishes by hand. So, but I just wanted to share.
You're right, because I think that's applied in anything, though. Even as you said, for accounting lawyer, but you're going to have to start out. It's going to be tough at the starting on anything that you venture into. But I think that's very much a hotel thing. I come from a hotel. I work 27 hours a day, and I complain for 25 of them. So, I mean, you do that, and I think that you say that to somebody that especially people that come from restaurants or hotels, because the hours are so long, that you're gonna have to know that the hours are gonna be long. But I think it's almost that badge of honor that said, and you're right, it's not helpful at all.
Well, I think it'll be interesting because I think we're at a point where some of those young kids coming in are going to be the only ones who understand AI and some of the things we get to. So they're going to have us all over barrel. So no.
And Dr. Bradford, that was how I sold many employees to not work for a hotel and come work for the DMO instead.
Okay, let's thank our panel just with space.